All right, so you're listening to Infiltrate Radio, and we are on episode 35. I already forgot, Biz. I already forgot the
Yeah,
episode.
35.
Episode number 35, and I am Patrick Joanne.
I'm Bizzle Jans.
And on the show today, we have Rachel Barnhart from Rochester here. She is. I'm gonna list off some of your uh, your resume here, Rachel, if that's okay. Monroe County Legislature, right, for the 21st District,
Yeah.
right? Acclaimed investigative journalist and anchor for WROC TV here and WHAM TV at some point too, right? And
Yes, I worked at Channel 13, Channel 8, and what was then, we're going way back here, our news.
okay, so we've got some international listeners and some people from across the country. So those are some local Rochester news organizations. So you were a journalist essentially, right? For those, and then you also did some work for the newspaper here too, city newspaper, right?
No, I've never
No?
worked for city news. My career was only in television, locally. So for 18 years, I was on TV in Rochester. For the 2 years before that, I was in the Southern Tier. And then in 2016, I had the crazy idea that I wanted to run for office.
Which I definitely want to get into how that all spawned a little bit later on. So as per usual, we'll kind of talk about what we're drinking here. I'll start with me because I got something a little bit different. This is Hibiki Japanese whiskey I'm drinking. Going fancy here, Biz.
Love your whiskey, man. Love your whiskey.
I do
Always
like
some brand of whiskey.
I do enjoy whiskey, and I might mix it with a little bit of Seed and Stone Pommeau. He's a local cider maker, so might mix that in a little bit later. But excellent whiskey if you can get your hands on it. And then Rachel, I know you don't have a glass there in front of you.
No, but if I did, I could definitely use one after this. I've been on Zooms all day. I would be drinking an old-fashioned muddled with rye.
Nice. So as a matter of fact, I've
like
made
turning into my mom.
with this Pommeau from Seed and Stone. I've made old fashions with it because it's a little bit sweet, but it's got it's like 20% alcohol, so it's like a light
Wow.
old fashioned that I make.
You've featured that before, I believe, on maybe like 6 or 7 episodes ago. I feel like the Pommeau was the feature drink.
Yeah, well, we did a show from his cidery too. And then Biz, what do you got drinking there? Biz doesn't drink alcohol, so there's always some weird soda.
Always something weird. So yeah, I have a product of Thailand. It's a non-carbonated energy drink, and I would guess that it's M150, but it could very well be miso, I suppose, depending on how you look at it. But
Did you taste it yet?
Yeah, it's awful. It's it tastes like it's been flat for so long that it's just
Well, it's uncarbonated, right?
Well,
So
yeah, no carbonation it's not even like slightly carbonated like Red Bull is. It's just best served chilled and then best before date.
does it taste like miso or no?
No, it tastes kind of like Red Bull if it
Okay.
sat out too long. A cold, flat Red Bull.
Gross. All right. This is why
It's awful.
This is why I drink whiskey, Rachel. And
Nah,
drink wine.
I can think of a lot of reasons why I drink whiskey every now and then, you know.
Well, I'm glad to hear you drink a little bit of whiskey. So, well, this isn't the reason why I had you on the show, not to talk about drinks in particular, but I wanted to kind of get into a few things because there's a lot going on here in Rochester,
A
obviously.
little bit.
Just a little bit, and across the country, and in politics. So you're kind of you've decided to get not knee deep into all of these things, but I'd say shoulder deep into the gist of all of this stuff. So, but before we get into kind of locally what's happening and what's happening in politics, because that's probably all you've been talking about all day if you've been on Zooms, I'm assuming. What got you into journalism? Like, what made you start with getting into that? Like, was there an interest when you were a kid?
Yeah, so I've always really been interested in the current events, right? So I always read the news, watched the news, and really thought that the power of the pen was a great way to expose things that were going on in the community, and a great way to solve problems, even if you can get people to talk about it and raise awareness and say that there's a problem. And so I did that for a long time, and I do think I made a difference, but I really started to get tired of covering the same things over and over and over again. And I decided that, you know what, these politicians, I don't think, I'm not impressed with a lot of them, and I on both sides of the aisle. And I said I just want to see what I can do to run for office, and so that's what I did. And I lost my first 3 races. I made people spend a lot of money to beat me, though. But I lost my first 3 races, and then I ran for county legislator, which is a part-time citizen legislator position. And it's and I've been in that this position since September 2019. So and here we are, more than a year later, and what a year it's been. It's been a little crazy.
Right.
Yeah, it really
What a
has.
year.
So one of the questions I kind of always get into with people too is like what drives them to do what it is they do. Like for instance, starting a business can be kind of, I guess, scary, right, to some people, or running for office of all things, right, getting into the public eye. I'm sure all the comments and all the mail you get in email are all positive, right, Rachel? When you get into
No.
when you get into politics, when you take a stance on something. But were you always doing that as a kid, like jumping headfirst into things like that? Like, were you?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that I always was very inquisitive and kind of fearless, right? I don't shy away from controversy, for better or for worse, right?
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I guess I've always. Oh, so in high school, I should tell you this. I mean, if we're really going, if you
Yeah,
always
I'd like to
this,
kind
in
of know
high
the.
school, I was suspended for writing an underground newspaper, and I wouldn't stop. So that happens.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you
Started off
did
as a rebel.
you start the newspaper itself, or you like wrote
Yeah,
for the?
I did. So I've always been a bit of a rebel, you know. I like challenging authority, and I always question authority. I believe strongly we have to question our government. And then someone said to me, "But you're the government now." And I said, "Yes, but I'm a legislator, which means we have oversight over the executive branch, and I take that seriously to mean that we have to watch what they're doing."
Do you did anyone in your family like was anyone in your family, mom, dad, or whatever, journalists or in the journalism or media in any way?
No, my parents were both in the city school district.
Huh.
Um, they were. My mother was a guidance counselor. My father was a dean of students at Edison Tech. Before that, he was at Marshall, where I went to high school. And no, they were city school district educators. But I will say that, you know, my experience growing up in the city, going to Marshall High, going to city schools, definitely shaped who I am today in terms of my views on inequality and social justice. There's no question. I'm a
Sure.
lefty. I'm a liberal. And I believe that nothing has really changed in a long time, and we have to do better. And I'm hoping to be
True
part of that
that.
change.
Yeah. Are your parents still teachers right
Not,
now?
no, they're retired, and they are still in the house I grew up in on Seneca Parkway. So
I think
Very cool. Very
your
cool.
dog wants to get in on the podcast back there. He's up on. What kind of dog is that? What kind?
City of Rochester logo there on my fireplace.
Oh, that's
So
Super
awesome.
awesome. Super awesome.
Where'd you get that? Is that a local artist that did that?
I bid on that at an auction.
Huh.
And oh gosh, the name of the artist is escaping me right now, but I bid on that at an auction for Reconnect Rochester, which I'm on the advisory board for. And yeah, it's a nice little piece.
So
Um,
for those that don't know, the Rochester logo is kind of like a flower,
Like the skeleton of a
sort of
flower,
thing.
I always say.
Yeah, like the
It's
Right.
apple.
Yeah,
like
we
a
were the
shell.
Flower City FLOUR, then we became the Flower City FLOWER.
WER, yeah.
Now it's just all interchangeable. All the young millennials, well, they're not, some of them aren't so young anymore, but you know, maybe about 10 years ago, it was almost like people really rediscovered the logo, and it became
Oh
like
yeah.
cool. People were getting it tattooed, and it just
So
there was,
many people have it tattooed. Yeah.
there was just this enormous pride in the city, and it was really wonderful to see. You know, definitely wasn't like that when I moved here, back here after college. Nobody had that kind of pride.
We had Aaron Costa from Crudco Skate Shop on, the
Uh-huh.
owner, and he was talking about that because he actually initially used the Rochester flower on a design or something, right? And then he had to alter it kind of
Well,
because
yeah, no, he used the
cease
original
and desist.
design for the flower, yeah, and after he got enough cease and desist, he decided to just kind of create his own flower, and they call it the Crudco knot. It's like a four-way flower, and I think the rock
Oh,
flower
wow.
is like a five or a four-way. So like it's a tweak on it. It's got its own variation now. So I mean, if we're the flower city, no one should argue that we have multiple flower logos, you know.
So, Rachel, what you said is for the Rochester Connect. Is that what you said?
Reconnect
Oh, Reconnect
Rochester. So
Rochester.
Reconnect Rochester is a wonderful organization that is really there to promote the use of public transit and pedestrian infrastructure and bicycle infrastructure. So
Nice.
the idea is that we broke up Rochester by building all these highways, by essentially building our community around the car, that we've caused tremendous damage. And so how do we reconnect our neighborhoods? Kind of like when we filled in the inner loop.
Yeah.
How do we reconnect everything to make it so it's easier to participate in civic, economic, and educational life without owning a car?
Hmm.
And so I really believe in that. There are climate benefits, economic benefits, physical benefits, health benefits
Yeah. Yeah.
to really getting people out of their cars and onto bicycles, walking, onto buses. And so we're actually undertaking a huge strategic planning effort right now. And so I'm learning a lot. I'm part of that. We're having a meeting bright and early Wednesday morning, another big day of Zooms. So yeah, I really believe in Reconnect Rochester. Check it out. They have
I was
website's amazing.
I was actually sad when I think they changed their name either to this or from this, but Pace Bikes kind of pulled out of Rochester because of COVID. I think they were only here I think like last year or the year before.
Yeah,
But
and I think a new thing is coming back now.
oh, is it? Okay, good, good. I really like that idea. It was kind of like inconvenient because I lived like on North Winton, and there were no like pace bikes in that area. And then right when I moved out of the area, they put a bunch of them like within walking distance from where I lived. So I was like, oh, that's lovely. I moved all the way out to Spencerport
Are
for a while, which is a
those are
suburb, but
the rent-a-bikes, like the city bikes?
yep. Just like how they have like the scooters and stuff in the bigger cities, you just pay like a
Yeah, I
dollar or
remember.
something
So
per
I,
30
I go out
minutes.
to LA every once in a while, and in LA, those scooters are just literally in every bush
Yeah,
along along the side.
like
People just
six
throw
different
them into.
companies. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we don't go to the scooter route because bikes are a little harder to throw into a bush, I think. So
No.
stick with the bike thing.
Yeah, and there are some safety issues now with the scooters. So
Right.
I
Plus,
don't
you're not being physical. You know, you're getting standing on it and throttling. You know, the bike. You at least are pedaling. You know what I mean? You're getting some physical activity. I feel like it suits more the healthy lifestyle that we should be pushing as a society.
Oh, absolutely. So I think I think we need to really kind of, especially when more people are going to be home now. A lot is going to be changing in the next 20 years, I think, in
Oh,
terms
for
of how
sure.
we get around and how we live our lives.
I
So
agree.
how are we going to how are we going to get around? What are our transportation needs going to be? Are there going to be self-driving cars? Are we going to be more interested in the ride sharing movement? What about public transportation? If we're staying home more and working from home more, what does that mean for the buses that are already starved of public funding? Those
Right.
are all of the questions that we're trying to ask.
So
And yeah,
I guess Rachel, one of the things I would say too about because I grew up in Queens,
yeah,
and in New York City, and so the public transportation, just the walking culture there is very different than what it is here. But what I see happening in Rochester that's super cool is that there's starting to be like obviously Park Ave is a big hot spot here for like people walking around. So there's a lot of foot
Oh yeah.
traffic there,
Oh yeah.
and
Big
people
time.
riding bikes and running and that sort of thing. At least during the summer when it snows up here, it's a little bit less, but there's still a walking culture there. But like the downtown area, and I think we spoke again with Aaron about this too, like how. Oh no, I think it's the guy from what's his name from Wall Therapy that we were talking about this.
Yep.
But
yeah,
like trying, yes,
uh-huh.
from like how to rebuild like downtown into like because Manhattan, the reason that people are walking around down there is there's businesses there. And one of the things I had mentioned during that, just being a former bar owner and restaurant owner, was maybe have some sort of incentive for businesses to go there, maybe like free the rent for them temporarily for a year or something, so that we can incentivize businesses to be downtown, which would incentivize foot traffic, would then incentivize people to live there because there's stuff to do right there when you come out of your apartment. Because I also lived, I'm in Greece now, but I lived in the terminal building downtown, and there's all these kind of luxury apartments that are popping up, but there's really not a lot to walk to over there. So you end up getting into your car and going out to the Park Ave area or outlying areas instead of staying there in the city, even though you're living there. And it's getting better. There's some stuff there. Is that part of the Reconnect Rochester um,
Yeah.
idea to get a little bit more of that happening too?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, again, if you reconnect our city, you do get economic development.
For sure.
Get more people. You do get better business districts. Think about the places that we love the most in our community. Do they have a sea of parking? Probably not.
Never.
It's like Cornhill and Park Ave and Pittsford Village, and they're the places where there's not a sea of parking. They're the places that are really walkable. So
yeah, and I think what's, again, with Rochester in particular, that's opposed to like in LA where it doesn't really snow ever. The idea of a bike is great during the summer, probably fall, spring. Well, late spring and early fall, right, in Rochester.
Right.
But there's all this snow on the ground, so maybe we start renting out snowboards or something, some kind of snowmobile rental program or something, so that during the winter. What do you think, Biz? Is that not?
Those seem a little riskier. I feel like, yeah, maybe a 100% electrical snowmobile, maybe, but even that, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
people don't wear helmets while they're riding around on those pace bikes, and not that the police can't enforce it, but the police don't enforce it as they, I suppose you could argue, should or should not. It's someone's right to want to splatter their brains on the pavement going 40, I guess, if they want to. But I think that would be a little too impractical, honestly, something like a snowmobile. But I would be interested to see, just kind of like, it's bizarre to me, places like Russia, like that experience heavy snowfall like we do here in Rochester and in the Western New York region. I mean, Buffalo and Rochester specifically put up pretty big numbers usually. Why have we not come up with a way to have like some sort of heating mechanism under our concrete that can ideally just keep the roads from ever officially freezing, thus reducing the need for the plow, thus needing the salt, all the things that cause damage, the pothole damage, everything that goes along with that. Yeah. So there's a spot in one of the Norwegian countries that they have like a geyser that they've rerouted to run under all of their main streets, so that because the geyser is heated, their streets never freeze because of it. And somewhere in either Moscow or somewhere around there, I don't remember exactly where, they have a special kind of pavement that is more absorbent than typical pavement. It absorbs like 5 times more water. And in turn, they've also have like special heating coils and things like that go under the pavement of the road that ideally makes it so that it never freezes, and again, never needs salt, never needs a plow, doesn't get the damage. In turn, it saves a lot of money, even though it's kind of a costly thing to get started. But
Well, I think that definitely affects the public transportation, the snow, and the amount of winter that we get here.
yeah.
But I do want to, I know you're pressed on time, Rachel, so I want to get into kind of some of the deeper things that are going on.
We haven't even talked about like local politics.
Yeah,
We'll get there.
So, but I do agree that I think there could be a really vibrant like foot traffic, and like street culture, I guess you can say, of like, small shops on the street, people walking around, because it happens on Park Ave here. There's a reason why I could grow up in New York City and live in Rochester. Like I tried to live in Ithaca. It's a very different culture there. It's again very car driven, but there's parts of Rochester that are very New York City, big city like, but then you have the cost of living, which is much lower here. So that's why I could stay here and raise my kids here. So, but you're now you've moved on from journalism and into politics. So could you give me the story of like, how did you make that decision, to move from journalism to being on TV to I'm going to run for public office?
I got to move my dog is driving me crazy. Now she's
Okay.
back to me here. I gotta just move. Okay. Well, as I said, I wanted to really tackle problems. I felt that our leaders were just playing games and going through the motions and really just wanting to keep things status quo. And so I ran for office really before it became, before a lot of progressives were doing it and women were doing it. And that was in 2016. And man, they beat the crap out of me. And real negative. It was terrible. It was a very painful campaign. And then I ran for mayor, which not my brightest idea, but I certainly did learn a lot. And then after that campaign, I filed a complaint, and so did Jim Shepard, the other opponent, against Lovely Warren over campaign finance activities. And then I ran for Congress, which was a really short campaign, came in second out of 4 people. And then I ran for county legislature, won that. And so here we are. And there have been certain themes throughout my running for office, and that have continued today. I care a lot about corruption, which is governing in self-interest. I think we need to do a lot of reforms in government. I care a lot about broadband internet and bridging the digital divide. And I care a lot. We talked a lot about Reconnect Rochester and making our community more walkable.
Yeah.
And I also think that we need to do more to directly help people in need, which means I would love to see Rochester pilot a universal basic income and see how that goes. So there are a lot of things that I really care about. And then I care about police reform. I mean, I was out there with the protesters and on September 5th, I got whacked in the head with a pepper ball. That was not fun. I do not recommend
Maybe
that.
we could just pause there for a second and talk just maybe a little bit deeper into that too, because again, I know you're pressed on time, and I would love to talk to you for 3 hours, Rachel, to be perfectly honest. But
I'll come back.
So, the protests that were happening here, they were, they were primarily started, I guess, in Rochester for Daniel Prude, right? But there's the theme that obviously was across the country, and protests were happening across the country and in LA and New York and everywhere else, around police.
And George Floyd, it started May, in late
Yeah,
May.
at the end of May. Yeah, that's what really I feel like kicked it off to such an extreme level was George Floyd, and Rochester had a couple like intermittent ones, if you will, but it really got kicked off once the Daniel Prude situation kind of unfolded.
I guess what for those people, again, we have listeners that are not in Rochester, New York, that don't have the local news here to kind of talk about what exactly went down in Rochester. So can you give us a little bit of like what prompted the initial outrage here over that particular case, the Daniel Prude case, and then what your personal experience, I guess, was being in the protests that were happening, both, maybe taking a little bit of a viewpoint of, all right, this is what the police were doing, and this is what the protests actually were, et cetera.
Yeah, so I can give you the Cliff Notes version of this. We found out on September 2nd that the Rochester police, that the city was hiding the in custody homicide of a man named Daniel Prude. And the video of the incident was horrific. A naked man in deep distress and mental health distress on a cold, wet pavement with officers placing a spit hood over his head, laughing at him and not treating him in any kind of humane way. And he died while they were trying to restrain him, even though he was in handcuffs.
Right.
It was a very traumatic thing to watch. And not only was the incident traumatic, but then you add on top of it what appeared to be a cover-up. And the city officials, including the mayor, they come out on day one and say, well, we weren't allowed to tell you. Well, that was not true. Every day their story changed and there were big holes in the story. And then they release 300 pages of documents to back up their story, even though they were carefully curated documents.
And that was not immediate, right? Because that was a few months later. That was what?
No, that was a couple of weeks later. Listen, everything feels like a few months, but we're talking about 1 month. Okay, 1 month.
But even the cover up, the part that you mentioned, the date of his death was back in February, was it?
It was March 23rd.
March 23rd.
Happened. Yeah.
Right, and it wasn't made public until, what did you say, September 2nd, right?
September 2nd. That's right. Yeah. So they hid this thing for almost 6 months, and then when but to me, it's a story of corruption. It's a story of a city hall that did not have a culture of disclosure, that did not think they had to tell the public when there was an in-custody homicide, that did not think they had to come clean when the public found out. These are not people used to having to tell the truth to us. Now, I've known that for a long time. Everybody else caught up. This is a corrupt administration. Corruption means governing in self-interest. It doesn't mean illegal necessarily, but it just means you're doing stuff that is not in the public interest. And I think we saw that on full display with Daniel Prude. And I would also say that if Lovely Warren had been held accountable for a lot of other things a lot sooner, including campaign finance, we might not have been in this community crisis today, where you've got tremendous questions over leadership and over police.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned that before, because I think she was indicted yesterday.
And she was indicted. The grand jury handed up the indictment on Friday, and it was for 2 counts: an election law violation and a criminal law violation of scheme to defraud. And the crux of the case is you have candidates are allowed to raise money in a regular account. It's, your candidate account. Let's say I'm running for office. You can give me $100. You can give me $100. You can give me $100. This isn't that you cannot give me any more than that. This is hypothetical.
Yep.
What Lovely did was she opened this other account, and this is all based on public records. Like, I'm not just making this up. It's all there for the whole public to see, on file with the Board of Elections. And then she opened up this other account called the Political Action Committee. And there are rules around political action committees. They're generally there to support candidates and causes. So that political action committee that she found could legally give her $100, because remember I said that was the maximum. Instead, what she did was she would have had YouTube guys go to the political action committee, each give $100. Then she essentially spent that $200 that you gave on her campaign. So she was like double raising money.
Right.
Entitled to using another account.
And just so everyone who's not local knows, Lovely Warren is the name of the Rochester mayor. She's been mayor probably close to 8 or 9 years now.
She took office in 2014.
Oh, okay, so it's been about 6 years.
So being that you had run for office, Rachel, too, right? Obviously, you have an idea of what some of those laws are. Is there the possibility that she would have not been aware of what was going on, or there was a...
Well, that's the crux of the case, right? I mean, that's what they needed to determine. There's no question that this campaign, there's no question that PAC benefited her campaign. There's no question. Sure. The question is, what did she know? And, she clearly was involved. I mean, there was travel on her behalf. There was a lot of stuff on her behalf. They even had a whole ball on her behalf. She needed to, but she's already said she's going to talk about intent, and, she didn't know it was wrong, even though she's a lawyer who's been in politics for 20 years. I don't know. It's not up to me. I can tell you that that was the crux of the complaint. I mean, you might as well just not have campaign finance laws if you're allowed to just have a second committee. It's just ridiculous. So that was the crux of the whole thing. And I just want to clear something up, because while I'm here and I can talk.
Please.
A lot of people are saying, well, all politicians do this. She's being targeted. Okay, first of all, I can't find another politician in New York State history who has ever done anything like this before. There's been lots of politicians who have been charged with campaign finance over time. I cannot find one who's ever done anything this brazen and of this magnitude. So no, all politicians don't do this.
So the question I asked earlier is from a matter of, I've never run for office, right? So that's why I'm wondering, like, how much of it is so for instance, there are people that get through college and really at the end of it they get a degree and don't know what it is they studied for those 4 years, right? And they come out of it with a degree and they have no recollection of anything, but yet they've passed it and gone on. I mean, do you think there is a an issue with what it takes to, I guess, get into a public office? Like, do you think almost like the same for police departments, right? I think it's the culture and the way that you go about assuming those positions that I think the problem lies, right? So I don't think there's a half, huge population of the United States that are just evil, blatantly evil. However, I think that there is some business, um, but I think there is some there are some procedural issues with what it takes to get into those positions, right? So lacks of training with politics. What does it take? So you run for office, right? Because I could run for office tomorrow. As long as I have enough money, right?
Office. I mean, almost anyone can run for office.
Just takes money to really back you, capital, which
Well, that's
is
what I
the
think.
beast
Like
in any problem.
so, Trump, right, had the money to just run for office, right? Which
Yeah.
for president of the United States out of the gate without even going for any lower office, and so I'm wondering how much of that is he just went for it and is ignorant of the laws that surround the law, the laws of running for office and what it takes. Same goes for Lovely Warren or whoever, right? Like from your experience is what I'm asking, is like how much could be ignorance, you think, and how much does it take in order to even get into a place where you're running for office? Do you already have to know before you even start that it would be impossible to be like, yeah, they don't know about that?
I think I think it's arrogance. I think it's just thinking that rules and laws don't apply to you.
So like
maybe there's a way to kind of slide through the cracks, and the truth doesn't always have to be discovered if you're not honest about it.
They're not coming after me, I mean, it was so brazen that I don't know of another explanation. I suppose if something's that brazen, you might be able to say, well, gee, maybe they really didn't know. But I don't know. I just her whole attitude about all of it has always been very curious. I mean, she just refused to stop.
There's been, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Lovely Warren who at the beginning of her campaign there was something about her family members and something to do with finances as well, if I'm not mistaking it with something else. But
I mean, the only nepotism thing with her was that she hired her uncle to be her security guard, and the whole community was like, I can't do that.
Yeah, I remember that.
That didn't last for very long because it's totally inappropriate. And that's really all I've ever heard. I mean, that's all I've ever heard about that. I mean, that was one scandal. Then another one was the Rochester Housing Authority, where she put Anna McFadden in took over the board. Anna McFadden became CEO, and a whole bunch of people looted the place, and now they're under indictment.
I don't think I even heard about that one. That's crazy.
Oh, really?
What year was that?
2015. Well, 2014, 2015, and then.
But a number of them were still on the board until recently, right?
Yeah, the indictments came down of Adam McFadden in 2019. Wow. Big scandal. The stink should definitely be on her. Now, I don't know if she knew what they were doing, but she definitely set them up to put them in a position where they could do all that stuff. Wow.
So one of the things that happened too was the police chief, right? Ended up retiring, and I'm doing air quotes, retiring.
Yeah.
Around that time, along with a number of other individuals within the Rochester Police Department, but yet she stuck around as well, because there were calls for her to be, or for her to resign as mayor.
I think they still are. Honestly, I think they're still going on.
Yeah. So like I'm torn in that request, right? To have someone resign without, now that there's indictments and there's campaign finance laws, maybe that she's again dependent on I'm not part of that trial. I'm not the trial for her. So from what I've heard, there's actual legal issues. Then possibly there would be a means to have her removed from being mayor. But what are your feelings on? So she was obviously elected, right? Just as you had to be elected. I mean,
She
do you
lost
think?
twice. Yep.
Yeah, do you think that there's a lack of accountability due to because it's there everywhere, right? I think there's a lack of accountability for the gravity of the position. A lot of people, human beings, they're all human beings, right? But human beings hold where they have a lot of impact on the lives of other people. Do you think there is a lack of laws in place that hold people accountable, or do you think
Yeah.
it's something where there is ill intent on the people involved or embedded in the institutions that are causing it to be somewhat corrupted?
Yeah, so I'll say this. I wrote a whole paper on it. Rochester does not have the accountability, ethics and accountability infrastructure that most other cities in New York have. Rochester does not have an independent ethics board. Rochester does not have an elected comptroller. Rochester has 5 at-large city council seats compared to 4 district seats. At-large seats are more susceptible to party boss mayors. So all of
Do
this
we
adds up.
do we know why that is? Like, why is it
We
that
do.
there's so many exceptions?
Yeah, we do know why. Because we have this thing called a city charter. It's kind of like our constitution. And over time, ever since we were granted our charter in the 1800s, we have been changing it and updating it to reflect our current needs and times. The last time Rochester updated its charter was the 1980s when we went to a strong mayor system. That means we went to electing a mayor instead of having city council appoint a city manager. The problem was when we changed the charter to go to a strong mayor system, we never actually finished the job. We never put in place the checks and balances on the strong mayor. So, and we also have 5 at-large district seats compared to, most cities now have a minority of at-large seats or no at-large seats. You just have districts.
Yeah.
And that stemmed from the days of George Eastman when the good government people, they didn't want the riffraff getting elected to office. So they wanted to make it harder to be elected to office by having citywide seats. That's what an at-large seat is.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Good
So
old Eastman.
yeah, it takes more money to win those seats, and they're not as close to the people. Now, I'm sure that the people in those would say that they are. But the point is, the district seats, you get to know your neighbors. You talk, every pothole, that kind of.
Right.
And you're not as beholden. More grassroots people like me get elected. I got elected to a district seat finally, right? So they're smaller. And anyway, I think we have a lot of work to do to have. Let me back up. Anytime you want to blow the whistle on misconduct in the city of Rochester, you turn around and you bump into somebody who's friends with the mayor, who donates to the mayor, is a political ally of the mayor, who owes their job to the mayor. I mean, you're screwed. So that's why we need to do all of these reforms.
Can I ask something? Because I'm ignorant on what a comptroller does, and I'm sure some of the people listening also, because I've heard it so many times. Comptroller, right? So what? Obviously, it's a check to the mayor, or at least the established leadership, right? So what do they do exactly?
A comptroller under state law, essentially, well, this is ironic. A comptroller under state law is essentially the city's chief financial officer. So the chief financial officer for the city was also indicted in this political action committee scheme. She was running the mayor's, she was the treasurer for the PAC, which is also highly unusual. So under state law, a comptroller essentially would take over the city finance department and on the auditing functions. You could write the charter in different ways to limit or expand a comptroller's power, but it's essentially the chief financial officer for the city. Some comptrollers really expand their job to look at how departments are functioning, to look to really write reports on certain problems, and how are we using our housing money, and really dive deep into that kind of thing. I would love to see that, because we're simply not getting that kind of city or county government. I think we should have a county elected comptroller as well, for exactly the same reasons. Both the city and the county have had enough scandals now in the last 40 years where we really need to have that happen. It would require a referendum. by the people would have to vote on it. We'd need enough signatures to put it on the ballot. Because I do not think that the city council would, not this was city council, would ever put it on the ballot on their own.
Yeah. So I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit here, and then I'm gonna get into something that I think is an idea that I'm 100% for. So some of the opponents to the Democratic, what do you call it? The Democratic, like, I don't want to say idea, but like
Anything?
agenda or whatever you want to call it, right? For the Democratic and liberal side of things, is that there's this tinge of socialism to it, and socialism never worked, and you know, that sort of leaning, right? Like, oh, it's just you want socialism, but there is a bit of because you have this mayor, right? That's what did you call it? You said a super mayor? Is that what you said?
A strong
mayor. Okay. Super mayor. Strong mayor. Like, there is a little bit of that, like, it's, if there is no oversight, there is no oversight over it, and people that have power tend to get corrupted because they have no checks on them.
Corruption is easy at that point, yeah.
Absolute power corrupts, etc. Right? So I'm wondering if the move, and I get this idea, oddly enough, from comedian Bill Burr, who said, why do we still have a president, right? Like a head of the government. Why is it not like a committee, or at least a few people? And what I think is such a great idea, even though he's just a comedian, like a stand-up comedian, about that idea is, like, you have Congress, right, that's checking the president, and you have the judicial part of the government that's ruling on whether or not things are constitutional or actually can be put into law, et cetera. And they can dispute those arguments and figure out the details of it. You have this one person, for whatever reason, that is the president, right? Why would that not be a committee of people, right? Maybe 3 or 4 people, right? So it's not Congress, it's not the Senate, it's not the House of Representatives, but it's a few people. I mean, do you think that our
Is there any country that does that? Most countries have like a prime minister or.
Oh, yeah. I mean, our government is set up so that we have checks and balances from the 3 branches, and you got to have somewhat equal weight. And I'm sorry, it's getting really dark in here. You got to have equal weight to that. And in the city of Rochester, we don't have equal weight. We have city council as 9 members, and they've essentially enabled mayors way before this one. And but we need to dial that back, and we need to have some other things in place. I think that the American system of government works, but again, you've got to have those checks and balances. And and some people think term limits are the answer. Some people think campaign finance reform is the answer. Some people think independent redistricting is the answer. There's lots of things that we can do to make this more fair and representative of the people.
Yeah, and what I kind of love about the American system, and it almost lumbers forward towards progress, because we go on this, we tend to like weigh on the left and then on the right a little bit, and the whole time we're making these small bits of progress as we move along.
Make stagger steps instead of a straight line.
Yeah, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But we eventually, which is why we've ended up being leaders in the world. And I think that there's a distrust, I think, in the system that exists. I mean, do you believe that we need some, because we can take steps to actually adjust in some way, not by completely redoing the system, but by adjusting the way that we do things in pretty substantial ways, honestly, which is, you know, there's the defund. I think we had this conversation with Taurus Savant, we had on, a good friend of mine, and we had this conversation about the defund the police thing. And I think from a PR standpoint, it's a good thing because it stirs up so much emotion when it's said, which is always a good PR thing. Whenever anything like stirs up heat and encourages discussion around it, I think that's a good PR, slogan or what have you. But like, do you think there needs to be a radical addressing of the way we do government, or do you think that there's we're actually the system itself is good? We need to adjust how we're approaching it, or the people within it. Like, I'm just wondering um, where do you think the problems lie? At a fundamental level with where we're at, and what could we do better?
Sure. So that was a lot.
I know, I know.
I think
I
no, I
tend to do that, Rachel. I'm sorry.
fine. I liked what you had to say. I think that we are a work in progress. Our democracy is a work in progress. It always has been. I think we're at a point where we need to get money and politics under control. We need to make sure that when we redistrict, that we're drawing fair maps and not to the benefit of any particular person or party. We need to make sure that that we're holding the powerful accountable. And we need to make sure that we have strong ethics infrastructure in place. I don't think that we have all of those things in place right now, particularly at the local and state level. Federal, sure. I think there's a lot that we can do. I'm optimistic. I certainly have a lot of hope for the future. I think next year is a year where the mayor is up for re-election. We've got 5 city council seats, all the entire county legislature, school board seats. I'm optimistic about the future. I really am. I think that we have an opportunity to elect really good people who want reform. And listen, if we don't elect good people and elect some of the same ones or some bad ones, the people have spoken. But we just have to keep plugging ahead. And I like to think of my role as sort of explaining why a lot of this matters.
Yeah.
I think that I like the optimism, because I think that sometimes with blazing a new trail, you need to do so with a machete.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
You're walking through a forest and whatever.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your optimism, because I think that's needed now too, especially from our leaders. And I think there's a lack of that. And I think that I also appreciate um, uh, your willingness to really just be upfront with what you believe in, right? So you were at those protests in person. So and I know we've only got about 8 minutes here before 7 o'clock, right? So I want to ask a kind of weird question.
That's okay. Ask a weird one.
So you were in the actual protests that were happening right here in Rochester, and you happen to get hit with, well, you said it was a rubber bullet
A pepper ball.
or a pepper ball.
Pepper ball.
So did it? What can you just? I'm gonna let you just explain what that experience was like what happened there.
So I was right at the front of the barricades with a bunch of pastors, elected officials, senior citizens. And when people started throwing stuff at the police, like a few things, they unloaded pepper balls on the entire crowd of 1,500 people, including me. I was at close range, and it hit me right at the back of my ear. And I had a giant lump, and it was very tender. My whole neck turned black and blue. It was very sore on this side. But it felt, the phrase, you got your bell rung. I'd never understood what that meant until that moment. I realized that I was hurt, and it hurt. Oh my goodness, it really hurt. It felt like someone had whipped a ball at my head, a hard ball at my head, and I was covered in chemicals. My hair was covered in chemicals. I was just covered in chemicals, and it was terrifying. I mean, it was emotionally terrifying, and physically, I was in a lot of pain, and I had welts all over, and I had a concussion. I was not feeling very well for about 7 to 10 days, but I'm fully healed. I'm fine. It was almost a month ago now. It's hard to believe.
I know.
What do you think we need to do? And I don't want to just put you on the spot, but I mean, what do you think, policing wise, what do you think needs to change?
Oh, goodness. Well, look, I think we ask police to do too much. We ask them to carry the burden of poverty, mental illness, housing, education. We want them to do too much. And the bottom line is most of the calls that they respond don't have anything to do with really fighting crime. we really need to rethink what we want police to do from the ground up. And, you know, for one thing, we spend $45 million on mental health in this community, but $350 million a year on law enforcement. And yet most of the police, 10% of the police calls are mental health related, and an enormous number of our incarcerated individuals are there for mental health reasons. So it's about, that's what the defund movement is. It's about looking at where we're spending our dollars and what are we getting? What are we getting for all that money?
Right, right.
And
it can be reallocated for sure.
right, we're not meeting the needs. We're not meeting the needs. And what, do you know what solves crime? Do you know, or prevents crime?
Public safety education.
How about treating mental illness, giving people
Right.
houses, giving people
Right.
food, giving people jobs? That solves crime, you
True.
know. We need to think about it that way. And I think one of the things that hurt me the most and really upset me in all this was, you know, people saying I hate police, people saying I deserve to get shot, and they were just so angry at me. And I'm thinking, where did I say I hate police? I was really mad at what happened on September 5th. I don't like what I saw. They shot up a church with pepper balls with people inside. I don't like what I saw. I thought it was unnecessary and disproportionate. But I should be able to criticize police without having people tell me I'm anti-law enforcement.
Agreed.
This is ridiculous.
I agree.
It's like the only aspect of government we can't criticize are police. Give me a break.
They're the ones I feel like that need more credit. You know, I brought up a couple times, it's probably one of my most reoccurring themes, is that when you have a bulletproof vest on and a weapon, you're not afraid of anyone. You know what I mean? You're not the in any position other than the agitator when it comes to an aggressive conflict. You know what I mean? Like you have all the protection you need. Me as an average citizen, whether my state of mind is ready to deal with you or not, you've already got tools that you can use against me. You know what I mean? It's something that the last thing that they need is to not be held accountable or responsible for what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this, you did say, you know, we just need to do better. And I agree on that. And I think the more conversations that we have around it, I think the better. And the more that we do hold accountable, and I keep saying human beings for a reason, but the more we hold accountable to human beings that are taking positions of leadership, we should be they should be held accountable, but we should also be encouraging people that are thinking that they are
above the law.
No, well, the people that think that they don't have any say to seek those positions as well, and make.
No, I agree
changes,
for sure.
Because I do think that the system itself, that the United States employs for our government, is probably one of the best. It's not perfect, obviously, but it's one of the best. And I think that people like you, Rachel, are inspirational.
Yeah, you're very good at what you do. When you said that it feels like it's your job to explain it. I think you do a good job doing that for sure.
Well, I think to just go for it, and
well,
even if
let me tell you, I don't get a benefit. Oh, really? I no one should be. I don't know. It's been an emotional. I'm going to be honest. It's been an emotional few days. I don't get a benefit from Lovely Warren getting in trouble. In fact, the opposite is true. People are just really mad at me.
Yeah.
And I've been very hurt over the last 3 or 4 years. It's not about me, right?
It's very thankless to do what you do, for sure.
The last 3 or 4 years for coming out and saying some of the things that I say. I always have receipts though, but it is thankless, and it's not about me. It's about the public. And I just my instinct is always to explain, knowledge, correct facts, correct disinformation. I think disinformation is the biggest threat to our public discourse.
So speaking of disinformation, I just wanted to make a quick correction. So Holland, Michigan, since the 1980s has been running hot water from their pollution, or not their pollution, excuse me, from their waste, redistributing it to heating the water so that it can keep the streets warm. It wasn't Moscow, it was Finland that had also done it. But right here in Holland, Michigan, right here in North America, they do it. I actually emailed you, Rachel, the link to the Holland thing if you wanted to check out it.
I just saw it. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I just wanted to correct that because I gave very vague statements about it before.
So we're coming up on the hour, and Rachel, I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah, I do have to go. My dog is all now antsy.
What kind of dog is he again?
I have a little girl. She's like right next to me. I don't know if you can see her. It's very dark in here. But yeah, Penny is a beagle. She's a rescue, and I love her so much. But she's had a long day. I counted up. I had 6.25 hours of Zoom scheduled today.
Wow.
Well, we're gonna let you go back to your wine. I
haven't even poured it yet. I'm going to.
Yeah.
First, take her out for about an hour-long walk while I can.
And we appreciate you coming on. Any last things you want to promote, or you want to?
You know what? Let's have a standing date. Every 6 months, have me on. I'd love to talk to you guys. This was a pleasure. I loved your questions. You asked wonderful questions. You know a lot about the community, and I'd love to start a beautiful friendship with you. So please stay in touch, okay?
Fantastic.
Sounds awesome. We'll set it up. It looks like April 5th, 2021 is a Monday, so we'll see you then, all right? It's exactly 6 months.
Bye, guys.
That date.
Have a good one.
What episode are we on here, Biz? We're
36.
36. So again,
35.
35. Jeez, you're already screwing things up over here, Biz. So episode 35, we had the wonderful Rachel Barnhart on, and Biz has got a new microphone. So we'll carry this on for a few minutes here, Biz, because she.
Oh, is that what you want to do
off,
here?
But
yeah, she dipped out.
But you got a new microphone. How's it? It sounds, hopefully good to the listeners. But
I'm gonna be honest with you, my setup I'm not happy with. I'm using like a chair, a stool, the microphone's here, the laptop's here. I got this white backdrop behind me to look so fantastic behind me. But
yeah, we're gonna try and do this video interaction here going forward. So Biz is in the movie business, so you gotta step it up, Biz. That's all I'm saying.
My lighting, my sound, everything is on point.
Yeah, no. Well, all right. But maybe we'll do a like solo you and I discussion too.
I was thinking about maybe if
we'll just pick some topics.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why don't we do, like, if we did even a 30-minute episode, like every Friday, to recap pop culture, recap our week, whatever.
Let's say this. Comment on our Instagram, which is at Infiltrate Radio _podcast, and tell us what you want us to talk about. We'll answer some questions. We'll comment on our personal lives. What color underwear Biz is wearing during the podcast, whatever you want.
Unfortunately, it's usually blue, which is funny. Just to leave you all.
Is that a conscious choice?
So check this out. It's funny because back when we were younger, my cousin had like a fascination wearing tighty whities instead of boxers, right?
This got weird real quick.
He would get so offended that we would drill on him for rocking tighty whities, man. Like, get out of here. You're like a teenager. Like that shit's not cool anymore. You're not an old man. You're not a child. Like, Get some boxers. And he one day called boxers Lucy Bluesies and thought it was the greatest comeback of all time. And I realized that boxers are predominantly blue most of the time, just like tighty whities are predominantly white most of the time.
That's true. That's true.
So I realized that, and now I'm stuck. Now I'm stuck knowing it. You get to know it as well.
This is a day I will never forget for the rest of my life, Biz.
Lucy Bluesies.
So also let us know if you enjoy the video aspect of it too. I think it's an extra little added bonus. And one thing, I got an email from Amazon because I kind of linked some of the drinks that we're having and some of the products we talk about during the show. You can really help us out if you click on the links. If you want to check out anything that we're drinking in the show, anything that we talk about, usually we try and link to it. And if you click on those links and purchase it through those links on Amazon, you're not purchasing it through us. It helps support the show. So it helps to continue this wonderful conversation that we're having. And I think next week, Biz, we've got the champion.
I think we do, as long as everything plays out. I hope so, because it would be real cool to connect with him.
We've got the champ, Willie El Mongoose Monroe Jr. Coming on the show, who's just a monster boxer. So I'm excited to talk to him.
International. Honestly, I remember he was in Europe not that long ago. Honestly, he had a match out there.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what he has to say, like how he got into boxing and all that. And
yeah, I've actually listened.
And...
I've actually listened to and watched a couple of his interviews, so it'll be nice to be a part of it. Honestly, it'll be cool.
So tune in next week. But yeah, I mean, Rachel Barnhart, that was really cool to have her on, because I think what's going on in the country right now is so crazy. I mean, the president right now, and we can talk about this. The president has COVID, like of all things, and
I'm really not that surprised by it, because of the fact that, I mean, one, he interacts with a lot of people, so it would make sense that he would get it. The other thing being that, like, people that are openly like arrogant against something, it's not that it's like karma or anything that gets to them, but it's a level of arrogance that he carries with him. He feels like he's potentially above corona, so he maybe doesn't wash his hands as much as he should, or doesn't, cover his face, or worry about that person is brushed up against, whatever it may be. You know what I mean, without him feeling that he's like, I'll be fine. That's what
I'm gonna bring this around full circle here, Biz. Ready?
Please do.
You ready for this? So I think we should all humble ourselves a little bit, and all
wash our hands.
All consider that we could be wrong.
Always.
When it comes to our ideas and what we believe in, et cetera, and be open to the fact that the people that we're talking to could know something or be privy to something that maybe we're not aware of, and take the time to really sit and listen to what the other side or the other person we're speaking to has to say. And as I grow older, Biz, because I didn't mention this during the show,
I know.
As I'm now 40 years old, I've learned to shut up more and listen more.
Yeah.
And I think that serves me well. I've learned more, in the last few years, and then I think I did in a lot of my 20s. I had my mind set on certain things, and I just hope
expectations are a bitch.
Take that same mindset and always be learning. So
I'll put that in your bio. I'll always listening. Moeller Cider House 40.
Right. Just those two things. But we'll link. What are you drinking again there, Biz? So I'm drinking,
Did you just call me Jizz? I think you did.
I'm drinking Hibiki Japanese whiskey, and
I've got M150.
Did you drink it all?
I took one sip and it's still completely full. I decided to start drinking Coca-Cola while we were on the air, and I also was sipping on our favorite Wegmans spring water.
Wegmans could sponsor us too.
That's right. I figure we haven't name dropped Wegmans anytime recently, so why
not? But thank you everyone for listening. We're coming up here on the half 100 mark. And I think Biz and I might start doing a bi-weekly thing. So the reason I'm putting that on the podcast, Biz, is now we're tied to that. And if you're interested in being a sponsor on the show, reach out to us. Instagram, Facebook, etc. Infiltrate Radio Podcast. And thank you all for listening. Thank you. We really appreciate it. And I'm Patrick Joanne.
I am Biz LaChance.
Are you though?
Always.
All right, and we'll see you next week.
Infiltrate Radio.